Hey everybody, Christy Glass here with a finished object for you. Oh, look at it. Isn't it so beautiful? It's the Asymmetrical Cardigan by Erica Knight, and I found this pattern in her book Simple Crochet. I decided to take it on during Crochet in May, which is a month on my channel that I dedicate to crocheting for the month of May. It just rhymes, and it seems to me that a lot of makers who do knitting and crochet, they turn to crochet around the month of May because the weather's changing and they're feeling like they want something a bit lighter, a little more climate appropriate. So I worked on this, and it was on an end hook, which is a giant hook. And the pattern has, I think, like 3 or 4 motifs, and each one you repeat many times. So my approach for putting it all together was to start with the motif that had the most repeats and then work my way down to the least repeats. So I think the first one I did was this motif right here. There were several, maybe high teens, like 18 or so. And then I moved on to the next one, which I believe is this flower right here. And I forget after that, but there's this sort of bigger one here and this one. I think those are the 4. So I had these little stacks of all of my motifs all put together, and then the pattern has this really clear layout of how you lay out the different pieces to create your sweater, this cardigan. I had my table. It was a white table, and I laid them all out. She had this instruction about cutting out paper and pinning it to the paper. That just seemed like steps I didn't need to take, so I just used my table and laid it all out. What did help me is in her book, she has the layout, and as I was sewing each piece to each other, I colored in the motif that I had used so that I could sort of get my bearings of where I was in the piece. It gets so confusing because it's all the same color, even though they're different shapes. Your mind starts going, where am I? So that was really helpful to have a little crayon nearby to just color it in once I had sewed it together. And I wanted to do that all in one sitting, so I did work on it. I think it was just a day, just an evening, maybe into the next morning, so that I knew that I was sort of in the same place and on the same page with what I was working on. So after I worked on that, and I made sure everything was connected in just kind of a casual sort of way. I wasn't too formal about it. My first pass through, I made sure every motif was attached where it needed to be attached. After that, then there is a little bit more construction involved with making the sleeve. And then there's this whole other category of sewing. So I would try it on, kind of examine where is everyone. And every once in a while, it felt like there was a hole where there shouldn't be. And so even though I was trying to attach it exactly where the pattern told me to attach, maybe there would be just like a little opening that I wasn't liking. So once I noticed that, like it looks like there's something here, then I would put a little stitch marker binding the 2 pieces together that I wanted to make sure were nice and sewed up and tight. So I did that about 3 different rounds. So I stood in front of the mirror, just kind of checked it out. This part was opening a bit too much, so I attached different motifs here and here to give it a little bit more of a formal, just like here we are look. And I only had to do about 3 passes of that. So I think when you look at it, you can still see the motifs and it's not too holy, and everyone's kind of in their right spot, behaving where I want them to be. Let me tell you about this yarn. So one thing that really frustrates me about patterns, because I did meet gauge. I just did the first one and measured it, and it was about the gauge, so I didn't do any crazy swatching. But what bothers me is when a pattern says it needs this much yarn and then there's so much extra. So I have 2 full skeins extra of yarn, which is fine. It's beautiful yarn. I'm happy to have it, but it's not a sweater's quantity, and it does cost money, these skeins of yarn. So it's this gorgeous bulky yarn from Morehouse Farms. I don't know the color name because she only sent 1 label. I ordered several of the pink and then some green yarn as well, and she just sent 1 label, but it is the most beautiful yarn. It's so squishy. If you haven't seen it, I went to the Morehouse Farm for an interview, and they have the most beautiful merino, local merino, Hudson Valley. It's just so beautiful. So I want you to see this yarn. It's so gorgeous. And it was such a pleasure to work with. It was so nice to have it on my hand with my hook. I enjoyed every second of it. And this is such a portable project because you're just doing all of these motifs, and then the sewing together is just one afternoon or evening. So it's a really wonderful on-the-go project. After about 3 or 4 times doing it, you memorize the pattern. So it's really, really, really easy to take on the go. I cannot say that enough. This was my first time doing an Erica Knight. I thought that her patterns were really well written. I believe she's English. So one thing to make note of is I think when she was writing out, she was using American terms, but the charts seemed to be still in UK terms. So that is something interesting. If you're a chart reader, just beware that I think that I wouldn't call it a misprint, but I'm just guessing that it's been published in a few different ways, maybe UK and US, and maybe they just took the charts from the UK version and put them in the US book. And maybe I'm wrong about that too, but it seemed to be very correct in the way she wrote it out. But then the charts seem to have slightly different terminology. So just keep that in mind. And just a reminder, everything in UK is about 1 height taller than in US terms. So that's just something to keep in mind whenever you're digging into a crochet project. Double check who the author is, because if it's UK, you may end up having a much taller project than you want to have. It happened to me once, and it was so sad because I realized it when I was already deep into the project. So I just finished it and kept it all consistent, but I always wondered what it would have looked like if I had done the correct stitch. If this is your first time doing crochet in the round, or you want to try out crochet, I do recommend this project for its repetitiveness. It is a bit tricky to put it together, but if you have vision and if you have bravery, you can make it happen. 100%, absolutely, I have no doubts. I also thought it would be fun to have a little shawl pin action. I could pin it like this, or maybe add a little button. For now, I've paired it with this floral dress, and I think it really brings out the pattern of the florals on the dress, and then highlights this gorgeous crochet that I'm wearing today. Thank you as always for checking in here at Christy Glass Knits and Crochets. See you next time. Bye.